Guess what we're finishing tonight? The Light Princess. The sun went down and the moon rose, and gush after gush the waters were rising up above the prince's body. They were up to his waist now. "Why can't we go and have a swim?" said the princess. "There seems to be water enough to do about that." "I shall never swim more," said the prince. "Oh, I forgot," said the princess, and was silent. So the waters grew and rose up on the prince, and the princess sat and looked at him. She fed him now and then. The night wore on, the waters rose and rose. The moon rose likewise higher and shone full on the face of the dying prince. The water was up to his neck. "Will you kiss me, princess?" he said feebly. The nonchalance was all now gone. "Yes, I will," answered the princess, and kissed him with a long, sweet, cold kiss. "Now," said he, with a moment of content, "I die happy." He did not speak again. The princess gave him some wine for the last time. He was past eating, and she sat down and looked at him. The water rose and rose. It touched his chin. It touched his lower lip. It touched between his lips. He shut them hard to keep it out. The princess began to feel strange. It touched his upper lip. He breathed through his nostrils. The princess looked wild. It covered his nostrils. Her eyes looked scared and shone strange in the moonlight. Her head fell back, and the water closed over. His head fell back, and the water closed over it, and the bubbles of his last breath bubbled up through the water. The princess gave a shriek and sprang into the lake. She laid hold first on one leg and then of the other, and pulled and tugged, but she could not move either. She stopped to take a breath, and that made her think that he could not get any breath. She was frantic. She got hold of him and held his head above the water, which was now possible as his hands were no longer in the hole. But it was of no use, for he was past breathing. Love and water brought back all her strength. She got into the water and pulled with her whole might, till at last she got one leg out. The other easily followed. How she got him into the boat she could never tell, but when she did, she fainted away. Coming to herself, she seized the oars and kept herself steady as best she could, and rowed, though she'd never rowed before. Oh, goodness me. Round rocks and over shallows and through the mud, and she rowed till she got to the landing stairs of the palace. By this time her people were on the shore, for they had heard her shriek. She made them carry the prince to her own room, and lay him in her bed, and light a fire, and send for the doctors. "But the lake, your highness," said the chamberlain, who, roused by the noise, came in his nightcap. "Go and drown yourself," said she. This was the last rudeness of which the princess was ever guilty, and one must allow her that she had good cause to feel provoked with the Lord Chamberlain. Had it been the king himself, he would have fared no better. Yet both he and the queen were fast asleep, and the chamberlain went back to his bed. Somehow the doctors never came, so the princess and the old nurse were left with the prince. The old nurse was a wise woman and knew what to do. They tried everything for a long time without success. The princess was nearly distracted between hope and fear, but she tried on and on and on, one thing after another, and everything over and over again. At last, when they had all but given up, just as the sun rose, the princess opened her eyes. The prince opened his eyes. The princess's eyes were not closed for the duration of this chapter. Chapter 15. Would you look at that rain? Look at the rain. The princess burst into a passion of tears and fell on the floor. There she lay for an hour, and her tears never ceased. All the pent-up crying of her life was spent now, and the rain came on, such as had never been seen in the country. The sun shone all the time, and the great drops which fell straight to the earth shone likewise. The palace was in the heart of the rainbow. It was rain of the rubies and sapphires and emeralds and topazes. The torrents poured from the mountains like molten gold, and if it had not been for the subterraneous outlet, the lake would have overflowed and inundated the country. It was full from the shore to shore, but the princess did not heed the lake. She lay on the floor and wept, and the rain within the doors was far more wonderful than the rain outdoors. For when it abated a little, and then she proceeded to rise, she found to her astonishment that she could not. At length, after many efforts, she succeeded in getting up off her feet. But she tumbled down again directly. Hearing the fall, her old nurse uttered a yell of delight and ran to her, screaming, "My darling child, she's found her gravity!" "Oh, that's it." "Is it?" said the princess, rubbing her shoulder and her knee alternately. "I consider it very unpleasant. I feel as if I should be crushed into pieces." "Hurrah!" cried the prince from the bed. "If you've come round, princess, so have I. How's the lake?" "Brimful," answered the nurse. Then we're all happy. That we are indeed, answered the princess, sobbing. And there was rejoicing all over the country that rainy day. Even the babies forgot their past troubles and danced and crowed amazingly. And the king told stories, and the queen listened to them, and he divided the money in his box, and she the honey in her pot among all the children. And there was such jubilation as was never heard of before. Of course, the prince and the princess were betrothed at once, but the princess had to learn to walk before they could be married in any propriety. And this was not easy at her time of life, for she could walk no more than a baby. She was always falling down and hurting herself. Is this gravity you used to make so much of? She said one day to the prince, as he raised her from the floor. For my part, I was a great deal more comfortable without it. No, that's not it. This is it, replied the prince, as he took her up and carried her about like a baby, kissing her all the time. This is gravity. That's better, said she. I don't mind that so much. And she smiled the sweetest, loveliest smile on the prince's face, and she gave him one little kiss in return for all this, and he thought them overpaid, for he was beside himself with delight. I fear she complained of her gravity more than once after that, notwithstanding. It was a long time before she got reconciled to walking. But the pain of learning it was quite uncounterbalanced by two things, either of which would have been sufficient consolation. The first was that the prince himself was her teacher, and the second was that she could tumble into the lake as often as she pleased. Still, she preferred to have the prince jump in with her, and the splash they made before was nothing to the splash they made now. The lake never sank again. In process of time it wore the roof of the cavern quite through, and was twice as deep as before. The only revenge the princess took upon her aunt was to tread pretty hard on her gouty toe the next time she saw her. But she was sorry for it the very next day when she heard that the water had undermined her house, and had fallen in that night, burying her in ruins, whence no one ever ventured to dig up her body. There she lies to this day. So the prince and the princess lived happily and were happy, and they had crowns of gold and clothes of cloth, and shoes of leather, and children of boys and girls, not one of whom was ever known, on the most critical occasion, to lose the smallest atom of his or her due proportion of gravity. That was the Light Princess, Christy. I love you. I hope we can jump into some water sometime soon. I love you. Sleep well, keep calm, find a llama, carry on, and I'll talk to you soon. Good night.